Senior Fellow affiliated with the Center for Eurasian Russian and East European Studies here at Georgetown, Foreign Service. And I'm delighted to see such a nice group of people here today on a day when there are some opportunity costs coming here. It is a beautiful day outside. And of course, there was some concern on our part about the metro. And you seem to have braved all of the various elements to make it here. And I think you will be rewarded for your decision. It's a great pleasure to welcome to Georgetown an old friend and dear colleague, Sergei Markedonov. Sergei is currently a professor at the Russian State University of Humanities in Moscow. I was, before coming to Georgetown in the fall, I was director of the Russian Eurasian program at CSIS for about 8.5 years, and was very pleased to have Sergei as a visiting fellow with us for about 3.5 years, doing a lot of work on the North Caucasus, South Caucasus, issues tied to Muslim communities throughout the Russian Federation, issues of terrorism, and I can tell you that Sergei is really one of the world's leading authorities on issues, security issues tied to ethnic conflict, sometimes with terrorism as well. And I think particularly on the topic today, protracted conflicts in the post-Soviet space, an enduring challenge for Russian and Western cooperation. I think it would be very hard to find anyone as well-versed with the breadth and the depth that Sergei has on these various conflicts, which are often referred to as frozen conflicts. Sergei will explain to you why he prefers the term protracted conflicts. And let me just say that this is the presentation, and Sergei's visit here to Washington is part of a series that we're running at CERES, a series of seminars tied to the theme of thinking about Russia's relations with the West, a path to normalization, question mark. With the 25-year anniversary now, the emergence of an independent Russian Federation, and its relations with the West, also with the United States. We're at a rather low point right now. I think there are some areas that we've had a number of successes, but one of the areas that we've had consistent difficulties and differences has been over the post-Soviet space, these protracted conflicts. So let me welcome Sergei to share his thoughts with us this afternoon. Sergei, you want to take the podium?
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for your time and for your attention paid to my presentation. First of all, let me express my sincere gratitude to Georgetown University in general. It's a great honor to make presentation here. Previously, I had a very positive experience contributing here, sometimes first time in 2008 and then sometimes after, including my stay at CSIS for 3 years. And of course, I also express my gratitude to my good friend and colleague Andy Kachins. It's a great pleasure. I immediately accepted his invitation because it seems to me for the latest time we have a lack of real dialogue between the Western, first of all, American scholars and Russians. We have different monologues, parallel monologues, and maybe accusations, blaming each other, but not attempt to really understand motivation of each other and some reasons behind that of this decision. Just today I'm going to speak about protracted conflicts in the post-Soviet space and to find some options for reconciliation between Russia and the West. First of all, of course, I need to portray the current situation and divergences between Russia and the West. I am going to divide my presentation into 3 parts. First of all, I will touch basic characteristics of the political conflicts in the post-Soviet space. Then I will concentrate more on Russia's approach, because it's a topic of many speculations and surprises. Initially, people were surprised by Crimean reaction of Russia in 2008, surprised about Georgia and Russian engagement. Yesterday, many people were surprised by the decision of Vladimir Putin It's not like kind of self-promotion, but even in November, previous November, I described these potential scenarios. It's available. You can read in German my article about basic scenarios of Russian foreign policy for 2016. It's entitled Sicher und Morgen, Security and Tomorrow. It's available at the website of the Vienna Military Academy. This is why my motto, please have less surprises and more understandings of the situation. As for ethno-political conflicts, just today and this year in general, we will have a lot of symbolic discussions, because this year we will celebrate 25th anniversary of the USSR demise. Until nowadays, this process attracts attention of scholars, experts, policymakers, and so on. Let me propose some intellectual, of course, provocative theses to be discussed. I'm not going here to teach a detailed lecture to you. I'm in the audience of distinguished scholars, master candidates, and future scholars, and so on. But I will offer you some theses to be discussed, and I hope we will have productive exchange of views, question and answer sessions. First thesis. Till nowadays, the process of the USSR demise is not completely finished. Because it's necessary to differentiate the historical process of the USSR demise, or dissolution, and judicial fact. Yes, on the 8th of December, 3 leaders of Slavic former USSR republics signed so-called Беловежье Accord. They judicially put final point in the existence of the USSR. But the dissolution of the USSR didn't mean and doesn't mean only abolishing or disappearing of former nuclear power covering 1/6 of the globe. It gave the start to another process, very important process of formation of new identities, new nationalities, new foreign policies, newly independent countries who tried to identify themselves, to find questions who were enemies, friends, strategic preferences of those states, and so on. In this way, this process now is not completely finished. And events in Ukraine demonstrated thus that this process can be more topical, more acute in this situation, because after more than 20 years of existence as a part of independent Ukraine, Crimea changed its status. It could be called annexation, it could be called reunification or return to the safe haven or native haven. It depends on your angle of observation. But nevertheless, this crisis demonstrated clashes of identities within one country. It's not a new trend. It was previously appeared in the conflicts in South Ossetia, Nagorno-Karabakh, Abkhazia, conflicts in Russia, and then so on, so on. We have conflicts of identities. We have problem with sustainability of the states, and moreover, especially since the end of the 90s, the post-Soviet space became arena of competitive interests of great powers and external actors. Because newly independent states tried to use different instruments to realize their own goals. As for protracted conflicts, now we see 5 actual conflicts. The collapse of the USSR was accompanied by 9 armed conflicts. I mean here some conflicts in the Caucasus, South Ossetia, Abkhazia, Nagorno-Karabakh, civil war in Georgia between 1991 and 1993, Ossetian and Bush conflict, and Chechen conflict, including itself some micro-conflicts, and civil war in Tajikistan, a conflict in Transnistria, and now we see the conflict in Donbass, the most cruel conflict in Europe after the collapse of Soviet Union and Yugoslavia. But currently 5 of them are actual. Some of them are more or less resolved, like civil war in Georgia. Some of them more or less frozen, like situation in Tajikistan. It's also problematic. And of course we have some latent conflicts, especially in Central Asia, and here border conflicts in which practically all countries of this region are engaged. Border conflicts between Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Fergana Valley Triangle, problem of enclaves like enclave Varukh in Kyrgyzstan or Uzbek territories in the southern part of Kyrgyzstan, also Kazakhstan, Uzbekistani borders, and so on and so on. Of course, Georgia and Azerbaijan are considered to be strategic allies, but interstate border between them is not demarked completely. There are some disputed areas, Gabichi, for example, and so on. This is why we see the process. The historical process is not the same as judicial process. By the way, Ukrainian crisis didn't discover a problem of contradictions between Russia and the West. It sharpened those contradictions. One of them is contradiction between two discourses of description, of perception of the country. In the US and in the West, normative approach is dominant. Judicial approach. If Russia violated Budapest Agreement or so-called big agreement, yes, it's responsible completely. A Russian approach is historical, not judicial. It concentrates not only on judicial format, on normative acts, like treaties, agreements, and so on, but problems of identity, problem of history, problem of historical traumas and national traumas, and so on and so on. This is why we see serious divergence in these, but nevertheless, the collapse of the USSR was not, of course, a real breakthrough from authoritarianism to democracy. It was not very simple transit from point A to point D. It was not linear development. And it seemed to many people in the West in 1991 or 1990, it was a very complicated process. Of course, the results of the USSR collapse is estimated differently. In Abkhazia, Georgia, it's not the choice about democracy and authoritarianism. Because one good example for me in Abkhazia, Abkhazia survived the first peaceful transit of power, transfer of power in 2005. Georgia did the same in 2013. But Georgia was labeled like champion of democracy, democratic choice. Abkhazia is champion of authoritarianism. It's not true. It's not about democracy supporters and authoritarianism supporters. It's about your identity, your understanding of your rights like minority in the future national independent country, because it was easier to proclaim yourself like independent Azerbaijan, Armenia, Georgia, Ukraine, but it wasn't much harder to create a attractive country for some regional ethnic minorities, where Abkhaz people could feel themselves like loyal citizens of Georgia, Armenians like loyal citizens of Azerbaijan, and so on and so on. In many cases, territorial principle has become more important than people on the ground. Currently, we are discussing the problem of Crimea. It looks like a problem of the span, which could be taken from one pocket and given to other one. Sorry, 2 million people in Crimea preferred Russian passport. It's not handkerchief, it's not a pen. From one pocket to another one. It's a problem also. I'm not justifying all activities of Russia, I'm not advocate of Kremlin, but nevertheless it's necessary to take into the account these factors. Maybe those people made a serious mistake. Maybe they faced illusions, they were hostages of illusions. Yes, of course, yes. But it's a factor. It's impossible to repeat like mantra, no business as usual. Okay, propose your business. What kind of new business can you propose in this situation? Sanctions only. It's not a smart approach in my mind. It's a much more complicated picture. This is why the process of the USSR is continuing like historical one, because the Soviet legacy united, fragmented, very fragmented post-Soviet space right now. Let's see on Ukraine. Anti-communism, decommunization, a lot of requirements or criticism of the past, appeals to the past. The same with Georgia, problem of occupation, discourse of occupation of Georgia. But who was Stalin? Guy who was born in Kursk, Belgorod, Orel, or from Gori? And so, interesting question, but the discourse of occupation is very popular. Baltic patterns are reproduced from time to time. But in the Baltic context, maybe they worked well, but what's about application or opportunities for application of this case in other situations, Ukraine, Caucasus, and so on. And of course, the problem of the USSR collapse is not only a factor of Russian or American or European Union intervention. It's necessary to understand motivation of people living on the ground, be them Chechens, Abkhaz, Crimeans, and so on, so on. Yes, they can address to some other actors. United States, Russia, European Union, or somebody else, but first and foremost it's necessary to understand the motivation. The second part of my presentation concerns the Russian approach to the protracted conflicts, because it's usual, it's traditional in the West to portray a Russian position like something primordial or something eternal. In a lot of articles, Russia is depicted like a country which supported de facto state since the first days of their existence, Asia, South Ossetia. It's not quite true, by the way. Russian position was very controversial. It changed many times. I wish to remind you that in 1996, Russia, together with Georgia, organized blockade of Abkhazia, when all males between 18 and 60 were prohibited to cross the Pso River in Russia. It didn't make Abkhazia close to Georgia, by the way. Russian position was anti-Abkhazian, by the way. It's interesting that very popular diplomat and scholar academician in Russia, Evgeny Primakov, is the most hated person in Abkhazia. Because he promoted the idea of the common state between Abkhazia and Georgia. He pushed Vladislav Arzenba, the de facto leader of Abkhazia, to Georgia, to the Shevardnadze and so on. What basic factors influenced on the Russian dynamics to the protracted conflicts? I can name you three basic points. The first one, Russian domestic agenda. When Russia seriously suffered from separatism and faced separatist challenge, threat in Tatarstan and Chechnya, its position to Abkhazia, South Ossetia was very, very cautious, sometimes negative. I personally met with a lot of people who engage in the reconciliation process, like Boris Pastukhov, he died, unfortunately, some years ago, Evgeny Maximovich Primakov, and so on and so on. That time position was very different. The second point, relationship between Russia and maternal states, like Georgia, Azerbaijan, and post-Soviet states in general. And also was influenced seriously. And the third point, of course, relationship between Russia and external actors, Western countries. And of course, speaking about Russian approach to the protracted conflict, it's necessary to register one more very important thesis, one more intellectually provocative thesis. Russia had no and has no universal approach to the conflict resolution in the post-Soviet space. No universalism. It's a situative approach. Currently, Russia recognized independence of Abkhazia and South Ossetia. In the concept of the Russian foreign policy adopted in 2013, official Kremlin recommends to the West and to Georgia to recognize new realities in Transcaucasia, Zakavkazia. We use not South Caucasus officially, but Zakavkazia, Transcaucasia. Why? Because South Caucasus term was introduced first and foremost by Turkish people, and it was actively used by Nazis for the period of World War II. I can't agree or disagree with this situation, I only register these facts. This is why officially Russia uses this term, Transcaucasia, not South Caucasus. Academically, yes, it's applied, both of them are applied, Transcaucasia, South Caucasus, but officially Transcaucasia. At the same time, Russia doesn't recognize, and even recognize, independence of Transnistria. Russia recognized Transnistria like a part of the conflict with Moldova. The same did Moldova, by the way, maternal state of Transnistria. The same do European Union countries, EU in general, and United States. All of them are parts of 5+2 negotiation format, and they share idea on Transnistria like a part of the conflict. And Moldova, unlike Azerbaijan, unlike Georgia, communicates with separatist or breakaway republic. It's recognized by Russia, it's recognized by the other sides engaged in the conflict resolution. After 2008, Russia, in spite of a lot of requirements, demands of Transnistrians, didn't recognize independence of Transnistria. The same Russia did after Crimean case. Russia didn't multiply Crimean case, regardless of numerous requests of South Ossets, for example. In 2014, parliamentary elections in South Ossetia took place, and United Ossetia Party won elections. This party propagates the idea of unity between South Ossetia and North Ossetia, which is constituency in the Northern Caucasus of Russia. It's a basic idea. of South Ossetia. But Russia doesn't support this idea. Yes, of course, we can imagine some changes in the situations who will influence the approach of Russia, be it Russian domestic agenda, relationship between Georgia and Russia, the West Russia, but Crimean case didn't become trigger for the changes. The same was in events of 2008. I brilliantly remember the context of those discussions at that time. Here, the problem, the question, who is the next, was widely discussed. I even remember a book edited by Svante Cornell and Fred Starr, Guns of August, when they predicted Crimea like immediate case of recognition by Russian Federation. But I wish to remind you that in October 2008, just 2 months after events of South Ossetia, Russia and Ukraine prolonged so-called big agreement. Because at that time there were no attempts of Ukraine to break status quo, favorable for Russia, and so on and so on. The next approach is applied to Nagorno-Karabakh. Unlike Transnistria and unlike Abkhazia, South Ossetia, the Nagorno-Karabakh Republic is even not mentioned in the Russian concept of foreign policy or in some other official documents. Russia greeted and greets any electoral campaigns both in South Ossetia and Abkhazia. It recognizes them. We have embassy of Abkhazia in Moscow and vice versa. And as for Nagorno-Karabakh, for any electoral campaigns, Russia makes statements oriented on the support of territorial integrity of Azerbaijan. Official documents. For Russia, officially, there is no Nagorno-Karabakh entity, like a separate entity. It's a conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Russia, of course, tried to play a specific role in this conflict resolution. Of course, nothing personal, just business. Russia characterizes Armenia like strategic ally and Azerbaijan as strategic partner. What's the difference? Alliance means sharing of the same integration projects like CSTO, Common Security Treaty Organization, and Eurasian Economic Union. As for Azerbaijan, strategic partnership means nothing personal, just business. Yes, if we could agree about military technical cooperation, of course, yes, but you will pay for market prices with discounts, like in the case of Armenia and so on and so on. It's a problem. I understand that many people can accuse Russia for this balance in policy, but it's not know-how of Russia, excuse me. I know a lot of cases when United States, which is considered to be strategic ally of Israel, also in parallel strengthen infrastructure of Palestine autonomy and pays money for it. What's the problem? Just yesterday I listened to a brilliant presentation of Ted Cruz, who said, we will stand with the people of Israel, I will not be judged between Palestine and Israel. Excuse me, your predecessors did the same, you would do the same. Nothing personal, just business. Because this country, first of all, protects American interests. Not Polish, not Czech, not Georgian, not Israel, and so on. The same with Russia. Russia is not protector of Armenia or Azerbaijan. First of all, Russian interests. It's understandable, it seems to me. This is why, as for Crimea, the case of annexation, different from some other cases. Of course, it's not completely restricted to the formal judicial format. One fact, I discussed this problem with one my good friend, he's Austrian lawyer. He was doubtful to the, how to say, adequacy of the word annexation applied to Crimea. He said, please, and I followed him and read some official documents, some classified documents of the Ukrainian Council of National Security and so on. 2/3 of Ukrainian troops deployed in Crimea changed their loyalty, but they made obligation. They were not experts like me. I can be pro-Russian or pro-Ukrainian tomorrow, who knows? It's not serious obligation, but if I'm military, it's very different approach. 2/3 of Ukrainian militaries changed their loyalty. Most of them are Crimeans, including Mr. Denis Berezovsky, admiral who was appointed the commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian navies just on the eve of referendum. For one day he was commander-in-chief of Ukrainian Navy, now he is deputy commander-in-chief of the Russian Black Sea Fleet. And some other plans. I know many my good friends, extremely liberal, who participated in the observation in the elections, who have relatives in Crimea and so on. It's not only about annexation. Formally, judicially, yes. In the wider context, it's much more complicated. But this case wasn't applied to Donbass, because Russia follows another approach in this area. Donbass is considered like instrument of potential influence on pressure on Ukraine. It would be considered like something looking like Greater Bosnia. And Donbass will be kind of counterweight, deterring the promotion of Ukraine to NATO and so on. It's not about secession, it's not about annexation. It's a different case. It doesn't mean that this position is constant. It's final. It depends on many cases. Please remember my thesis proposed some minutes ago. 3 formats. Domestic agenda, agenda of relationship between Russia and post-Soviet countries, Russia and the West. 3 formats. Defining the Russian approach to the protracted conflicts. This is why we have a variety of different approaches. They depend on many situations. And one more thesis, very important. Usually, Russian approach to the post-Soviet space, to protracted conflict, is portrayed like one-way ticket. Russia wants to do this. Russia wishes to annex that, to promote this and that. Sometimes Russia reacts on some challenges, reacts on unfriendly policies, on attempts to decrease Russian influence. For example, the conflict between South Ossetia and Georgia. You know that in the early 90s, about 50,000 refugees from Georgia arrived in North Ossetia. They compose 16% of our population in this region. Now we are actively discussing migration crisis in Europe. In North Ossetia in the early 90s, we had more problems with migration crisis, more cruel problems, because those migrants were engaged in hostilities with Ingush and so on. In the case of Saakashvili's victory, we will have the next migration crisis. This fact predetermined Russian very disproportionate, very cruel reaction in 2008. Not NATO. NATO is for Dядя Petya, for electors. It's not serious. They were a real ground for the situation. And of course, it's necessary to differentiate complexes of Vladimir Putin, rhetoric of Vladimir Putin on the first channel of the Russian television, and Russian objective interests. Because the problem of Russia is low qualification of promotion of our interest, explanation of them, but it can't deny the interests themselves, of course. Sorry. What about the Western factor? As for the West, Western policies has not been also primordial and internal in this area. It's not Russian know-how also. In the period of 90s, Western countries were not so active in the post-Soviet space. They concentrated on the Balkans. They rebuilt this area, securing stability and so on. Now we can discuss the cost of this stability, instruments of stabilization of this region, but it's more or less stable right now, cynically speaking. Yes, I'm ready to discuss the price of this question in different cases like Serbian Crimea, which became pattern for all conflicts, and this is why Russia has brilliantly remembered this situation. Many people admire the Russian approach in Ukraine or Syria, or maybe tend to be surprised, but no ground for real surprises. For Russia, the situation in those conflicts is very clear. For Russia, the red line is the military defeat of proteges of Kremlin. This is why we can discuss everything around Donbass, but not military defeat of separatists supported by Russia. Any other options? Yes, let's discuss. Kadrovization of Donbass or something similar, or westernization or something else, not Serbian Ukrainian petition. The same with Assad in Syria. The same algorithm. Yes. Using of force to strengthen diplomatic positions. You can break a couple of chairs to have access to their birthday party. Maybe. Okay? But it's necessary to understand the logics. And of course, Russian reactions sometimes are not predetermined only by Russian ideas or Russian desires. Sometimes it's also reaction to two-way ticket, not one-way ticket, a round ticket. It's necessary to understand. Coming back to the West and to the post-Soviet space. After some waves of enlargement of both NATO and European Union, the Western world, the Western country, became closer to the post-Soviet space. Before it, Russia and the West survived a period of disappointment, seriously promoted by divergences of the results of the Cold War. It's core divergence between Russia and the West. In Russia, the results of Cold War are considered like Russian will to push away the burden of the Soviet Empire. We stopped our hostilities. It was our will. It was not a result of defeat in the competition or confrontation with the West. While the West considered the Cold War like a victory, not victory of the United States like a power, or NATO like a military bloc, but our values, and so on and so on. The first time this idea was proclaimed, as you know, in the period of electoral campaign of George Bush Sr. I understand many reasons behind. It was an electorally attractive slogan that I am responsible for our victory, for defeat of the USSR. Yes, it's a great picture, but then it was exploited, provoking divergences. And after the Cold War, the European security began building with no Russian engagement. As for a Russian approach and Russian-Western divergences, it's usual to describe them like history of two stages. The first stage of Yeltsin, last times, brilliant relations, and cruel Vladimir Putin came to power, destroying this paradise. It's not quite true. Because many ideas of Russian foreign policy in general and approach to the post-Soviet space were formed under Yeltsin. It's interesting that Russian propaganda and hawkish people in the West sometimes promote the same ideas. Decreasing the influence of Yeltsin, overestimating the role of Vladimir Putin. But please, Russia considered the post-Soviet space as a zone of its priority interest. It was under Yeltsin. Russia intervened in Tajikistani civil war, Georgian civil war. Russia played a role as peacekeeper in Abkhazia, South Ossetia, Nagorno-Karabakh. Till nowadays, the only document signed by Armenians and Azeris was a ceasefire agreement signed on May 12, 1994, due to activities of Vladimir Kazimierov, special envoy of President Yeltsin at that time. He's very my good friend. He's now more than 80. He's retired, but very active and very interesting person. He played a significant role. Now it's practically forgotten. And some other points. Just a couple of days ago, I was asked by my American colleagues about model proposed by Russia for the resolution of the conflict. Let's read Dagamus Agreement of 1992 for South Ossetia. Let's read idea on common state proposed by Primakov for Abkhazia, the same for Transnistria. They were not realized. And what's about alternative ideas, models, and so on and so on? The next point, which was shaped under Yeltsin, skepticism to NATO enlargement. First time Russia criticized the NATO enlargement like a method for securing European architecture after the World War II was done in 1994, just after Brussels summit of NATO, not under Putin. It's interesting, by the way, to know that in 2001, when Putin became president, contributing in German Bundestag, Vladimir Putin characterized Russia like European power, like part of the European world, sharing European values. He did it in German, fluent German language, not in Russian, by the way. This is why no classical division between Putin and Yeltsin. Many ideas were, and of course, Munich speech. I am not sure that most of people who write about Munich speech really have not read the speech. Because otherwise they can compare ideas of Munich speech of 2007 and Istanbul OSCE Yeltsin speech in 1999, practically the same idea. One idea proposed by Russia for 25 years after the USSR collapse. Please treat us like equal partners. We are not students. You are not teachers. Treat us like China. Don't care about our domestic agenda, our human rights abuses, and so on and so on. If you are cooperating with such democratic countries like Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and so on, what's the problem to cooperate with Russia? Excuse me, you cooperated with Stalin under World War II. What's the problem? Putin is not Stalin. And currently, Russian social policy is looking like social Darwinism, not communism, by the way. I mean, here cuts of social responsibilities of the state. Medical care, education, and so on and so on. If you are keeping fit, please, okay. Social Darwinism. When I was in the United States, I talked a lot with Congressman Donald Robacher, you know him. Usually when he travels to Russia, he asks me to meet with him to discuss situation in the Caucasus and the post-Soviet space. And in one of his statements, Donald Robacher compared Putin's Russia with Reagan's United States. And he said that there are more commonalities between them, psychologically especially, than between European Union current and Reagan's America. You know, the evil empire term was introduced by Donald Robacher, who was speechwriter of Ronald Reagan at that time. And, of course, Russia was not unhappy with NATO enlargement, with unilateralism of the West in the Balkans, but it didn't touch Russia directly. Russia had interest in those areas, but they were not ideas of the first class, or interests of the first class for Russia. But the post-Soviet space is a different situation. I read a lot of texts which say that Soviet nostalgia or pro-Soviet opinions are dominating the Russian discourses, so excuse me. But Russia deployed 80% of the Black Sea Fleet in Sevastopol. It was not about Stalin. It was not about Ushakov and Suvorov. I understand Ushakov and Suvorov were not so completely stupid guys, choosing Sevastopol like a haven for the Black Sea Fleet. But it was about current situation. You can say Black Sea Fleet is weaker than the weakest fleet of the United States. Yes, you would be right. I can agree with you. But this fleet played its own role in some conflicts. For Russia, it was enough, by the way. There is a Russian proverb: "Дурак не дурак, а свою пятерку в день имеет." Russian-speaking persons can understand this proverb. Maybe I'm a foolish guy, maybe I'm stupid, but I have my $5 per day. Okay, this fleet did the same. As for South Ossetia and Georgian conflict, I described the connection between situation in North Ossetia and Ingushetia and South Caucasus. Situation between Pankisi Gorge and security areas, security challenges in Dagestan, Chechnya, and Ingushetia, also clear. And a lot of spaces, a lot of places. We share 7,000 kilometers of common border with Kazakhstan. It's gateway to Central Asia. Very turbulent, unpredictable, unstable region. Relating to Afghanistan and their wider complex of security problems in this area. 7,000 kilometers. Distance between Shanghai and Moscow is lesser. Okay. Yeah. It's a very substantial problem. When the West, but I will try to be brief. But when the West began penetrating in the post-Soviet space, it provoked problems in relationship between Russia, because we have asymmetry of perceptions. For Russia, post-Soviet space is priority number one. Now we can speak about the Cold War between the West and Russia, because Cold War was a global competition. Russian interests are more local, because of lack of resources, problems with ideology. Our competition and confrontation is not quite ideological, it's more about interests. It's not about ideology. Russia is not building communism or proposing the ideological alternative to the world and so I see that events of 2003 in Kiev of Dmitry Kozak plan in Transnistria became watershed in relationship between Russia and the West. As for color revolution, there were consequences. First time the West demonstrated that post-Soviet space became competitive arena. I brilliantly understand the problem of the Western penetration is not only about desires of the West to play a significant role. Yes, it has, but not only. I understand that newly independent countries are interested to have an alternative to Russia because some of them were disappointed, like Georgia, who agreed to be part of CERES, to deploy Russian troops in this territory, believing that Russia could transfer Abkhaz handkerchief from one pocket to another one. It failed. This is why it addressed to the United States as a kind of more or less objective judge in Georgian point of view. The same with Moldova, Ukraine, and so on. I'm not sure. I'm so skeptical. Characterizing this choice like choice for democracy and so on. Excuse me. It's choice for maybe a strong state, strengthening nationality, national identity. It's about geopolitics. It's about competition, but it's in lesser extent about democracy and so on. And of course, my last on this point, situation in Ukraine, I started my presentation with it, didn't open problems between Russia and the West. It sharpened problems and contradictions. Those contradictions, summarizing, asymmetry of perception of the post-Soviet space. Because for the West, this space and Russia's role is a part of greater puzzles, wider puzzles. Like Eurasian competitors to the United States, some challenges to the global domination of the United States. I understand brilliantly reasons of the United States. Because Russia created precedent of competition, of unilateralism, which was not supported by US. If US can agree, okay, China will do similar things tomorrow, India maybe in 2 days, or Japan or somebody else, Turkey. There are a lot of conflict, disputed areas, and so on and so on. But asymmetry of perceptions, divergences in discourses, judicial, normative, historical, cultural, and of course, misunderstanding of the results of the Cold War and its results. Because it's one of core problems in relationship between Russia and the West. Now, speaking about conflict resolution, yes, we can discuss Minsk agreement. By the way, the same problem with this text. I'm not sure that many people who addressed this document really read it. And of course, lesser people really paid visit to Donbass, understanding the realities on the ground, and so on and so on. And this document is very contradictions, and there is no mechanisms. Which point is first, which is the second? Yes, there is a point of restoration of Ukrainian control over the border, great. But there is other point about this restoration after comprehensive resolution, political resolution of the Ukrainian crisis. Which one is priority? For Russia, the second one, for Ukraine is the first one. And a lot of contradictions. I'm not sure that it's seriously productive to discuss one document with no connection with the wider context. Because not speaking problem of European security with Russian engagement, we will reproduce some disputed questions. It's called issue. European security with Russian engagement. European security understanding not like NATO security, not like EU security, but security with Russian engagement. Yes, we have a lot of Asian territories, they are vast, but 80% of our population live in European part of our country. And historically, Russia played a significant role in the European security, since Peter the Great, World War II, Yalta Potsdam, and so on. This is why it's necessary to find the place, the haven, for Russia to play a role of European security guarantor together with NATO, not against NATO, together with NATO, together with the European Union. And after it, we can speak about details of the Donbass conflict resolution, status of Crimea, and so on, understanding that this problem is not limited by the evil view of Russia. Thank you so much. And now I am open for your comments, questions, notes.
Okay, let's open it up. I see a number of hands. Please identify yourself for Sergey. Margie, I think I saw you first.
Marjorie Mandelson-Balzer, Georgetown, CERES in anthropology. Sergei, I appreciate your saying that Russia's approach has been very situational, not primordial. And in that spirit, I would like to think that we could differentiate the separatist challenge, the degrees of separatist challenge between Tatarstan and Chechnya, for instance. They're not hardly the same thing in the older days as the Soviet Union's demise was in process. But what I'd really love you to talk about, and what I think a lot of people in this room would like you to talk about more, is your specialty. The issues of Chechnya, what are we supposed to be thinking about Kadyrov, and the degree to which that has been changing, especially in the recent period. So North Caucasus.
That's my question too.
Okay, well, why don't you take those first two questions, Sergei?
Way to go, it's a mouthful, it's a lot.
Okay, thank you so much. It's an interesting question. First of all, let me advertise me a little bit. Some of my texts devoted to particularly the Kadyrov case and developments of the post-Soviet Chechnya are available at RussianDirect.org website. They're available and it's very easy to access them. As for Chechnya, first of all, maybe 3-4 theses, yes, if it's possible. First one, conflict in Chechnya is rather different from other separatist conflicts in the Caucasus in the post-Soviet area, because it's not a conflict only between breakaway republic or separatist periphery and center. It was a conflict between separatists and champions of pro-Russian choice. It was a conflict between Islamists and ethno-nationalists who tended to build an ethnocentric republic. It was conflict between Salafi Muslims or Wahhabis or Wahhabists. There is a specific term in Chechnya, very actively propagated by Kadyrov, Wahhabisты. It's kind of combination between terrorist and Wahhabi. And Sufi Muslims. It's very interesting because this conflict, by the way, seriously influenced on the change of Kadyrov's further approach to Russia and problems of unity between Chechnya and Russia. As for current Chechnya, it's an interesting case because it's the only breakaway republic which returned to the maternal state. The other point number 2 after it, the price of this return, the price of the question, it's so high. Because this region is very different from not only typical Russian region in the center, like Ryazan region and Moscow, of course it's understandable, but from regions in the North Caucasus, Dagestan, Karachay-Cherkessia, Kabardino-Balkaria, and so on. Region having its own sometimes foreign policy desires, because it's usual in the Western media to describe Chechnya like isolated republic. It's true, but not quite true. It's half true. It's isolated from the West for the Western influences, but it's not isolated for Islam influences, Muslim influences. There are regular flights from Grozny to Arabic countries, including Saudi Arabia, and Ramzan Kadyrov also traveled to Saudi Arabia, by the way, competitor of Russia in the Middle East, or United Arab Emirates. He is not a businessman, he is not rank and file Russia, who chose the United Arab Emirates like a place for resort for vacations. It's a little bit different. Of course, there are a lot of particularities in terms of religious policy, gender policy in Chechnya, differentiating seriously this republic from the rest of Russia. Yes, it's true. But now we see an interesting phenomenon when the image of Chechen people seriously changed. 10, 15 years ago, Chechen man was identified with threat to Russia, with terrorist figure, separatist, a lion, by the way. Currently, it's perceived like a soldier of Putin. This term was proposed by Kadyrov some years ago. It was a kind of propaganda. It was used, mentioned sometimes, many times by mass media persons, but it was not seriously discussed. Currently, yes, because he declared loyalty to Russian power, readiness to be engaged in the conflict in Donbass, support of Crimean case, Russian policies in Middle East, and so on. whom Ramzan Kadyrov blamed as the most important enemy of himself, Tarkhan Batirashvili, well known like Umar Ash-Shishani. You know, this guy was liquidated or not liquidated. Every day we have controversial information. I counted 9 cases of his liquidation. Just yesterday CNN confirmed his liquidation. Maybe he is dead, but Tarkhan Batirashvili is son of mixed marriage. His father was Georgian and mother was Kiskin. It's the identification, specific identification for Chechens and Ingush and Pankisi-Gorge. He was radicalized and he became the highest ranked person from the Caucasus in Syria. Kind of symbol. And Ash-Shishani became brand of the Caucasian participants in Syria, like Coca-Cola, like Pepsi or Levi's. It's kind of brand, Ash-Shishani, actively propagated by Syrians and so on and so on. One of the reasons of Russian engagement in this campaign. This is why it's rather controversial. In the case of Georgia, we can speak about some Kadyrovs among Abkhaz, who would be ready to play particular role in the region, but under the Georgian flag, to be soldier of Markedonov or soldiers of Ivanishvili. I don't know any serious groups of Armenians who can protect Azerbaijan and Nagorno-Karabakh. It's different situation. It differentiates Chechnya from other regions. But the question is clear in my mind. The price of this, the price will you pay for it? For me, it's clear that in every cases of conflict, it's impossible to come back to the point before the start of the conflict. If hypothetically we could imagine that Vladimir Putin or his successor, Alexei Navalny, who knows Garry Kasparov, will decide to give up Crimea, it would not be a restoration of status quo of 2013. It's necessary to understand. It's very easy, but it's very hard to imagine, to understand the situation. This is why, speaking about Donbass, yesterday I was asked a question, what's the decision for Donbass? Please find your Kadyrov. I knew one interesting person in the Russian government in the 90s, Gennady Kulik, who read some documents, agreements, and asked only one question, what's about me? Where is me in this text? Mr. Zakharchenko and Mr. Plotnitsky in Donbass, reading the text of Minsk agreement, should find them there, with their business, with their guarantees. After it, no problem. But of course it would not be integration like before 2014. It's a price of the question. Tatarstan, of course, I understand, it's a different case from Chechnya. There were no, where is wood? No cruel hostilities, no fighting in this republic, but a lot of ethnocratic particularities, differentiating this republic from other one. Let's observe discussion about post of president in this republic. Very hard, by the way. Last year I was in Tatarstan. I made a presentation on the Caucasus, on the political conflicts by guys from the Tatarstani Academy of Sciences. What do you ask question? What do you think about the post of president? For me personally, honestly speaking, no matter. It's not a subject. This post could be characterized even Tsar, even Emperor of Tatarstan, but under the Russian flag, no problem for me. But for Kremlin, it's a problem sometimes ecological and so on, but it differentiates this republic from the other one. This is why we should find price of the question. The case of Gagauzia is interesting, by the way, for our observation. Because Gagauzia proclaimed its independence from Moldova even earlier than Nagorno-Karabakh did the same, or even Transnistria, but afterwards...
That's another matter of degree in negotiation.
Yeah.
Back to North Caucasus.
Yeah. But nevertheless, price of the question. This is why speaking about Kadyrov, the most important problem right now is problem of potential change in this republic. And the most important problem is not who would be the next, but what would be the next. What system? Because I can imagine a decision of Kremlin, because Kadyrov became irritating factor for Moscow, for Kremlin, for those guys, and so on. Of course, yes. Because he tried to consider himself like somebody equal to Putin, maybe not completely, but close to this level. It's irritating factor. And I can imagine a situation then Kremlin will decide to stop the relationship with Kadyrov. But otherwise,
But then what happens to the Kadyrov seat? Are there really 30,000 Kadyrov seat fighters?
but
That's a pretty important part of the system.
yeah, I understand. You can interrupt me by, I can say practically the same. In this way, we will have another Kadyrov, or Chechnya, Kadyrovized Chechnya with no Kadyrov. It would be Odessed by Sultanov, for example, cousin of Ramzan Kadyrov, or somebody else. This is why it's necessary to also pay attention to this. But generalizing for the conflicts, price of the question, price of negotiations. Oriented on my own experience, I don't believe in discussion on values, democracy, and so on. I'm skeptical. Because I visited practically all hot points in the former USSR, I believe in guarantees, I believe in pragmatism, I believe in discussion about business, personal interests, guarantees for families of guys participating in the conflict and so on. I believe in this. Maybe I'm wrong. Who knows?
Any follow-up questions, comments on the North Caucasus? Okay. Yes.
Yaroslav Brysuk, Deputy Chief of Mission at the Embassy of Ukraine in Washington. You mentioned, you contrasted the...
I was not deceived, by the way. Watching on you, I thought you are from Ukraine.
You saw my reaction to some weird. Well, I would like to react to some things that you said. Well, mainly you contrasted historical and cultural approach that Russia adheres to, and the judicial and normative approach that it necessarily doesn't have to be bound. But I'm sorry, the judicial and normative approach, these are the rules of the civilized world. This is the international law. And under the international law, what Russia is doing in Ukraine is called simply aggression. Russia's action violates the most fundamental norms of international law, the UN Charter, the Council of Europe obligations of Russia, the Helsinki Final Act, not even mentioning the Budapest Memorandum and bilateral agreements between Russia and Ukraine, where Russia agreed on multiple occasions to respect Ukraine's sovereignty. And
yeah, I know. I read this memorandum.
Well, they are the law, and Russia simply broke this law. I mean, there must not be a reconciliation until Russia is returned to the realm of international law. And the conflict in Ukraine is not an internal conflict. It's a conflict brought by Russia. This is simply Russian aggression against Ukraine. You mentioned Crimea, and today marks the second anniversary of the sham referendum in Crimea, March 14th, held at the gunpoint of Russian soldiers. I mean, you can try to justify the attempted annexation, but even some Russian NGOs, like the Council on Development of Civil Society, that operated under the auspices of Putin's administration, named the number of 30% of people who took part in that referendum. Only slightly half of those voted for secession. And by the way, the referendum questions were only, are you for secession of Crimea from Ukraine, for independence of Crimea, or are you for Crimea joining Russia? Wasn't even an option of Crimea staying in Ukraine, not even talking about that it violated the most fundamental norms of Ukrainian laws. And the same continued in Donbass, where administrative buildings of Ukraine were seized by Russian special forces operatives. Kirkins, Rybkov, and Borodai, they're Russian citizens. They have nothing to do with Ukraine. Soldiers with Russian ammunition that does not exist in Ukrainian army, and you cannot buy, Russian tanks of the modifications that we don't have. They are in Ukraine. They're fighting against our army. Those separatists have been fighting against regular Ukrainian army for 2 years now, and our country was spending $5-7 million a day for ammunition for our army, for the cost of this conflict. You can't possibly say that it's the disgruntled miners and teachers and whoever who are fighting. You stop Russia's support of that, and that's the conflict will end. So here's the recipe for the resolution. Please, Russia, get out of Ukraine, and the conflict will stop immediately.
By the way, Sergei will be speaking over at the Atlantic Council tomorrow morning on a panel with Grigory and Muria
Yes.
on Ukraine. A concise response.
Yeah, of course. You raised
We have a number of other questions.
A lot of questions, by the way. Speaking about discourses and divergences in discourses. Okay, of course, Russia also tries to use the normative approach, by the way, appealing to Kosovo, appealing to referendum. It doesn't mean Russia denies these discourse completely. I spoke about dominant discourses. So, speaking about the conflict in Crimea and Donbass, excuse me, but the problem of Crimea and the identity of Crimeans didn't appear in 2014. I can remind you experience of 1994. Yuri Vishkov, Bloc Russia, won 90% of voters and so on. I can remind you events of 2008, different reactions, not only of Russian passport holders, but Ukrainian passport holders. There were three at least positions of Ukrainian politicians to events of 2008 in Georgia. But the problem of Ukraine, as Alexei Miller, not Gazprom head, but historian, said it's a nationalized country searching identity. And foreign policy choice sometimes can promote domestic hostilities. I can also quote a lot of works written by Ukrainian authors like Sergei Kudelia, who is from Lviv, by the way, who is professor of Baylor, who wrote a lot of brilliant articles about hostilities in Donbass. I'm from Rostov-on-Don, by the way. My first trip to Donbass was paid at the age of 3, to Moscow at the age of 13. I know brilliantly the situation in Donbass, problems of Donbass identity, of course. Speaking about a conflict of Ukraine, I see that we usually oppose artificially to discourses. Domestic conflict or international or Russian engagement. Both of them. No opposition. This conflict had domestic roots. And excuse me, the problem of Crimea was predetermined by Maidan development. Situation in Maidan and revolutionary of Ukraine broke the monopoly of state violence. You spoke about fighting between separatist and regular Ukrainian troops. What's about volunteer battalion paid by Kolomoisky and so on? They made these hostilities severe. The regular Ukrainian troops, I brilliantly remember the first days of so-called ATO. It was kindergarten. Regular Ukrainian troops shook hands with the local citizens and no problems. But when volunteer battalion, highly motivated, paid by oligarchs. What's about oligarchs, by the way? Your revolution was against oligarchs. All of them have the same interest, the influence on their agenda and so on and so on. It's key problem of this revolution. Idea of escape of Russia, which became idea fix of new elite, came into power, provoking some problems, some resistance in Crimea and Donbass. You're absolutely right, speaking that without Russian engagement, we can suppress those hostilities. Yes, of course. But also it's necessary to understand that those people living on the ground are not Vatniki, not Colorado. Excuse me, I attentively observe mass media of Ukraine and social networks. There are a lot of pretense to be the first-class citizens and Vatniki, Savki, и так далее. Excuse me, they are people with their own will, their own estimates and so on. They didn't agree with the results of Maidan. Of course, in Donbass we have differences because many people who were critical to Maidan at the same time were not ready to be part of Russia. Yeah. This situation was in Donbass. The results of your sociologists demonstrated the divergences between Crimea and Donbass. But in Crimea, it was dominant discourse. It was not only a Russian factor. Yes, this factor added situation. But speaking about change of borders and Helsinki Final Act, couple of words. It's one of my beloved questions. Very simple exercise I really offer to my students. Please put two
lists. Number of countries signed Helsinki Final Act in 1975, and current European countries existing after Yalta-Potsdam system died. Little bit different. And of course, annexation was not used by US in Kosovo. Absolutely. Kosovo didn't become a 51st state of the United States. By the way, people living on the ground didn't want about it, didn't dream about it. But imagine that US would not intervene in this situation. I am absolutely sure no victory at Albanian side, Kosovo side. No victory. The same in Croatia. If Croatia wouldn't be supported by Germany, Austria first, then United States, no Serbian cry. This is why some engagements were used to break previous borders, to break previous status quo. Russia used method of annexation, but we are discussing methods of the change of the border. Military intervention, violating, by the way, international law, without agreement of UN Security Council and so on. It's about methods, it's not about principles. There are interests and there are breaking situation in favor of this side or that side. It's also necessary to understand and to discuss. I understand this problem is very complicated. Honestly speaking, me personally was not in favor of annexation or reunification of Crimea. Me personally wrote and proposed Transnistrian or Abkhaz variant for this situation, to not cross the red line, because me personally understood and understand the difference between the Caucasus and Ukraine for the West. Ukraine is a red line. But we have what we have right now. And no illusion that new successor of Vladimir Putin, even opposition representative, will change situation around Crimea. Alexei Navalny, Mikhail Khodorkovsky, Mikhail Gorbachev, Nobel Prize winner, yeah, recognized with some nuances new status of Crimea. The maximum of criticism at opposition side, idea of Yavlinsky to provide a second referendum with observers and so on. Even Yavlinsky said, even after this referendum with international observers, OCC control and so on, the most of the population will vote for Russia. Even Yavlinsky. It's a fact. You can admire it, you can hate it, but it's a real fact on the ground to deal with it.